The War on Drugs. The band has been together since, what, 2005? So like 10 years.
Yeah, almost 10 years, yeah.
Hard to imagine. So what did you guys listen to when you were growing up anyway?
I listened to, personally, stuff my mom was into, not so much my dad, only because he was a lot older than my mom, but my mom was into Roy Orbison, and she was into George Harrison, and then I kind of got into rock music due to my older brother, stuff like REM and Hendrix and Neil Young, stuff like that, and then kind of, I think the first discovery I made on my own, maybe, that I felt cool about was Spaceman 3 when I was like 15. That was the first thing that I heard somewhere that no one had played for me, you know, or a tape I hadn't bought or borrowed or something.
Something that you wouldn't ordinarily hear on the radio.
Right, it was one of those things where it was like something I heard in a store, you know, a record store, and I had to seek out what I was listening to. How about you guys?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm the product of an older brother, you know, so
Right.
it's like Zeppelin. I grew up on, you know, the Stones, Zeppelin, and the Who, and then, you know, a lot of Fleetwood Mac, and then I sort of, Miles Davis was my, like, thing I found on my own, you know,
Right.
like electric, like Bitches Brew sort of Miles Davis sort of thing, and then went from there.
A lot of Simon and Garfunkel in my house.
Oh,
Yeah.
That was kind of the soundtrack of my
Definitely.
upbringing. Sgt. Pepper and Simon and Garfunkel, and then I think Nirvana Incesticide was like
There you go.
or maybe Bleach, one of the Nirvana records. But I feel like we have sort of a shared vocabulary of kind of classic rock, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of like,
Floyd.
Charlie's into like smooth rock, you know? And then
Smooth
like I have like,
rock.
I'm into like ELO and like Adam's into, you know, like the more fragmented stuff probably, but then there's like this giant overlap of the Venn diagram, which is like pretty much the classics, you know.
Right.
Well, people who write about your music, you know, those writers, refer to, you know, the period music, quote unquote, that seems to show up or permeate some of your sound. So where does that come from?
Well, I think some of that comes from hearing sounds that maybe are reminiscent of famous records, or for instance the 80s thing, you know. I mean, I like to collect a lot of different equipment, you know, and I like to find out how something can be used in a cool way in the studio, or something, you know, piece of gear I didn't use in the last record that I can use that maybe I've never seen before. And then you end up getting a sound from them that you really like, that you're like drawn to after some experimentation. And maybe what you're drawn to is a little bit of nostalgia from something that you once liked, but then it's been changed through your own process of learning how to record and produce and get the sounds you like. But I think that I like the way records sound from the 40s all the way through yesterday, you know, and sounds used on those records and touchstones from some of my favorite records. You know, like something like Springsteen probably has my two favorite snare sounds: the super dry one, and then the super huge one. You know, and those are just things that when I listen to music, I hear those things. You know, or at least I started to hear those things in the last like 9 or 10 years, when I got a lot more serious about like recording music instead of just playing it all the time. But you know, I guess just a lot of my favorite songwriters and our favorite bands are kind of maybe staples of certain eras, you know. And then live too, it's like a little bit of a different experience live, because you know, on an album it's maybe like 40%, 25%, 18% band live in a room, you know.
It's a generous estimation.
And then and then the record is done, and then we get to kind of like reinterpret those first impressions that are like recorded, you know, and overlapped and then pieced, and then we get to reinterpret that energy into like a live band scenario. So it's cool because the songs end up evolving into things that they're not, you know, the sound of the band is almost something different than what's actually on the record sometimes, which is interesting.
All right, well, let's leap into the present. Lost in the Dream. The record's actually been out for over a year now as we speak. And I know you were quite surprised, if not taken aback, by the response, the reception that it got. the, shall we say, critical acclaim and making it to number one on a lot of best albums lists of 2014. So, but now that it is a year hence, can you see it from a different perspective than when you were caught up in the moment and in the response to it?
I guess so. Yeah, I don't know. I try not to. I'm still like, I'll probably be surprised the rest of my life.
What do you attribute it to, or do you try not to?
I think that
be too
there's. I
analytical?
think that there's like. I don't think there's anything other than like certain moments in time line up, and like that record meant a lot to me, and it was like, and to the people who helped me make it, and there was like a nice energy surrounding it in our circle, and we put a lot of time and effort into it, and we were like thinking about how we were gonna change the band around and like tour and also play the older songs differently, and I think it just came out, and there was like these songs that everyone had little favorite moments of all these different songs, and I didn't really understand until we've really been on tour now for about a straight year, and you hear when you start playing a certain song, people will get excited. You can hear it in the crowd, the beginning of Ocean, or in the middle of Suffering, people get excited. And it's like all these little moments that people either think that they're their own thing, or like they just they feel connected to it.
I can process this as your friend, not as a participant, because I think it's a soulful record. Like that's why I love it, and I'm just taking myself out of the equation. I just think that there's a soulfulness to it in the songs.
Yeah, going around the country too, it's, I think the people who love it to a degree that's a little bit, unusual.
It's cool.
Like it's not just that they think it sounds good or something. It, touched them in some kind of emotional way.
I mean, the audience is so wide, sort of age-wise and everything.
I think in the past I always had a bunch of sounds that I was trying to sculpt into songs and find ways to make them into songs. And this time I was just about trying to write it or have a really good first impression on tape, and then once you have like a solid song melody, then you could start playing with the arrangement and the sounds, and it was cool. It's like one of those records that I think I got better. I think that's the thing. It's like, each record I just want to get better if I work harder, then it's gonna make the band work better together, and I think it's gonna keep getting better. I was happy to have finished it, and you never think about things like commercially or anything, but it's definitely gotten to so many more people than I ever thought it would, and it's done amazing things for the band and for us as friends and players, and so I'm thankful for it.